Hello everyone. This video is a little bit about AWS and a little bit about using AWS Academy to use AWS. So AWS stands for Amazon Web Services. It's a cloud provider. It's one of the biggest cloud providers. You can also call it a cloud platform. So as we know, the cloud is an abstraction layer that's provided by server and storage farms, and it provides virtualization-like software that allows us to use the underlying hardware. So there's a hypervisor that allows us to run things on cloud servers. So all cloud providers have underlying farms that are geographically distributed around the world. So that includes all of the cloud providers: IBM, GCP, Azure, AWS, and any others. So what we're going to do is we're going to use AWS, but we're going to use it through a sandboxed environment so that you don't end up spending a lot of money, of your own money or the college's money. So AWS Academy is the sandbox that we're going to use, and you've been allocated a certain amount of credits. So the standard is $100. I actually don't have a choice about that. That's the way Academy works. So we don't want you to use a regular AWS account because that could end up in costing you a lot of money because you have to give them a credit card, and it's surprising how quickly the costs can get away with you when it comes to cloud, especially if you leave a process running or you're not aware that something's going on. And AWS is huge and it's a bit hard to manage it, so it's hard to know what's going on sometimes unless you're really, really familiar with it or you have monitoring software, and none of us are that. So on cloud providers, you're charged for where you run your instances, so what farm you're running it on. And when we use AWS Academy, we're going to be using AWS East. It forces us into that because of where we are. So it's on the eastern seaboard of the US. Everybody accesses that component, that server farm, or series of server farms. So it is possible. Let's say you have clients in Europe. You may want to run your services in a European zone. That would cost differently. Or you may want to run it in an Asian zone or an African zone. So there are ways you can do that, but each of these will cost a different amount. We're also charged for network traffic to and from the instances, and So any code that you transfer, any large packets, all of it are charged. The storage that you use is charged. It could be AWS S3 storage, which is a particular storage platform where you can load things. You could be storage for your AMIs, your machine images. You'd be charged for databases if you're using databases. Any serverless code that's running, you're charged for the instances of the serverless code that run. So there's a lot of things that you're charged for, and it can add up really rapidly. So this is why we're using this sandboxed environment. So there are limitations to it, and it says Educate there, but it's Academy. Educate was replaced by Academy this year. So your VM cannot persist when you log off AWS Academy. And while you are logged on to the Academy, it will stay up a maximum of 4 hours. So it might sound okay, but what that means in practicality is that your VM is only running when you're logged on. So it's not really good for pedagogical reasons, but I don't believe that most of these places that provide academic services actually ask any teachers how they're going to use them. So unfortunately, they're not the best implementation. And the practical result of this is that every time you launch your VM, the DNS and IP will have changed. So these instances use DHCP and dynamic DNS, so it changes every time you shut down and start up. So in order to test your web server, what you're going to do is you're going to deploy a web server. Or to access your VM via SSH, you must first of all be logged into AWS Academy and running a lab session. And then when you log out and go back in, you'll have to go to the EC2 console and find out the new DNS IP to use to access your website. So remember those limitations. So now I'm going to do an overview of logging on and starting an image. So what you see here is what you see when you log on. So you click on that button in the email that was sent to you from AWS Academy. It will ask you to create a Canvas account, get a password, keep track of the password, and then it will show you this page. So this is the Learner Lab, and it'll ask you to do, the first time you go in, it's going to ask you to accept the agreements and stuff. So you have to do that first. Then once you've done that, you click on Modules, and you should see this. So I want you to first read the Learner Lab so you can limit your, there's some stuff there that you should know. But then when you're ready to launch your instances, you click on Foundation Services. So this page will load, and on here we have a console here. We have some information which is in the starter that we saw and how to access it. We have, this is what will get you to the AWS console, but as you can see, it's not available yet. It's got a red dot. And here you have a maximum of $100, so this is what has been used or not. So in order to use it, and then there's some detail here, but because it's not running, I don't have anything going. And then there's the README that we just saw. So in order to start it, in order to use it, I have to start the lab. So I'm going to click on Start the Lab. So once it's started, we should see something like this. So this is all the same, but we have the green button here. So that means we can go to the AWS console. So notice here it says US East 1, which is where we're running, console, Amazon. But we are encapsulated in the Voclabs ID. So it says campbell-edu. It's a Voclabs user. So I've been on here before, so it shows what I've recently visited, but if you scroll to, so here I don't need that. So if you scroll down, you'll see Build a Solution. So this is where I want you to click on it because you're going to launch a virtual machine. So now we get this, we're using the new experience. I opted into the new experience because it's going to be easier. So we want to launch an instance. So we scroll down a bit, and we are going to, because we're familiar with Ubuntu, we're going to use Ubuntu, a Ubuntu image. And notice it says canonical Ubuntu 20.04, which is what we have on our VMs at Dawson. And then there's some information here. I want you to keep track of this information, so put it in your engineering log. And then here we're running it on T Micro. So these are the machines essentially that will be emulated. The virtual machine that will be emulated is a T Micro, and this one is free tier eligible. And we can have a look at a few others if we want. But what I'm going to have you do, use the defaults. So what I'm going to have you do now is we have to create a new key pair. So you need a key pair in order to access this system from your Dawson VM. So we want to be able to access the AWS VM from the Dawson VM. So we have to create a new key pair, and we give it a name, AWS VM. I guess I'll call it Trisha. So it's RSA and PEM is the format because we're going to be using it with OpenSSH. So I'm going to create a key pair. So as you can see, when I create the new key pair, it's going to save it on the system. So I'm going to put it here, PEM. I'm going to call it 2 because I've done this before. So I created a new key pair. Now, the reason that it automatically downloads it for me is because I'm going to need it to access it. So this is the key pair that I'm going to use. And let's just take a quick look at the network settings. And here, as you see, we want to allow HTTPS. We're going to set up a HTTPS server and HTTP. So this will set up the firewall rules. So the packet filter rules for AWS, not for our system, for AWS. So we're going to leave the storage at the default. And then here's some advanced details, which we don't really need right now, but take a look at them when you do this yourself. So now that I've done all of this, I have my key pair. I have my everything that I need. I'm going to launch the instance. Launching, launching, launching. It's successful. So now I look at my launch log just to see what happened. Everything succeeded, so that's good. So now we're going to connect to our instance, but let's view all the instances in the EC2 console. So here you're seeing the EC2 console or dashboard. And this is the instance that I just created. So I'm going to have a look at the instance. And as you can see here, I have some information about it. I've got the public IP address, the public DNS, and this will change when I log off. And we also have an internal DNS. So this is internal to AWS. And then down here I can see some of the details. So let's look at security. So these are the firewall rules that I set up, networking, the IP addresses, storage, the storage that I'm using. So dev SDA1, 8 gig. And then there are some status checks. There's nothing going on right now. We don't want to do that. And here we have some monitoring information. There's nothing here right now because we just started it, or very little here right now because we just started it. So no data available. We'll have to look at that later. And then tags. We didn't give it any tags. So now that I have my instance running, I can connect to it. So what I need to do is I need to take this key that I downloaded and put it on my VM. So I'm going to pause for a second to let you do that, or me do that. So here you will see that I have copied onto my VM my PEM file, NF file. As you can see, it's my private key. So what happens is AWS sets up the public component of this key on the image that it launched. So I need to use it in order to shell into the my VM. So my AWS VM. So what I need here is the DNS. It's just easier. Whoops, sorry. Let's copy it. And then I need to copy it here. And what I need to do is SSH-I and then give my key name. So I says use this key, and here's the DNS name of my running VM. So it says my fingerprint, it hasn't been saved, so I guess I want to connect. And it gives me a private key file. So it's telling me that the current permissions are too open. So I have to change those permissions to make sure that my files are not accessible by others. So I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to show you. I want you to do that yourselves. So I changed the permissions on my key. Let's see if it works. I'm getting permission denied, public key. Let me fix that. So my key seems okay, but I can't connect to the system. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect here. So as you can see, there's different ways of connecting. You can do Instance Connect, Session Manager. I can't use Session Manager because we're using AWS Academy. I can use SSH Client. Notice the client information here that I was just trying to use. And then the Serial Console and the Instance Connect. So this is the one that we can use. So if I want to, I can connect through the console here, and here it is. Here's my system. So that's no problem. And then if I go back, just looking at this, I think I see the error. I forgot to put my user ID in there, so I'm going to give that a shot. So here, I think I was rejected because I didn't have my user ID. I didn't notice that at the time. So let's give this a shot, see what happens. Okay, it worked. So what I was doing here is, if you notice, I'm using verbose, so I'm getting all of the debugging messages, and it connected. But look here, it's got IP address 172.31.27.33. So as you can see, I'm on a Ubuntu machine. And if we look in here, we see it's Ubuntu 20.4, so we're in. We're good. But notice my IP address. That's not the public IP address. What is that? Well, you can find out what that is by looking on the EC2 dashboard. So that's one of the things I want you to keep track of and put in your engineering log. So notice everything that's set up. So now that I'm in, I'm good to go. So now I can install Apache, I can configure HTTP, configure HTTPS, and I can use SCP to copy over anything I want from my Dawson VM to the AWS VM. So as you can see here, I've SSH into the system as I was before, and what I've done is I've opened up another terminal because I want to copy my file, website tgz, over to my VM. So this is my Dawson VM on the right, the AWS VM on the left. So what I want to do is I want to copy there. So in order to do that, I need to use SCP. There's other ways to do it. You can install FileZilla, whatever you want, but I'm going to use SCP. This is the best way to do it. So I need to use SCP with the PEM file, and then I need to use the syntax of SCP, so it's source destination. So I want to go from website to Ubuntu at, and I need my DNS name. Oops, I don't have that in there anymore. Give me a second. I'm going to go back to my EC2 console, look at my instance. Here's my public DNS name. I need that again. Copy it. I could use the IP address, which may be easier, but what the heck. So here, get rid of the stuff. Shift insert. There we go. So, oops. What I have to do also is put this, because I want it to go there in the home directory of the user Ubuntu. So there I've transferred my file. So now if I look here, ls-l, this is the user ID Ubuntu ID. So as you can see here, I have my website, and now I can install everything I need and move my website over. So I just used SCP to do that. So you're going to need to use the dashboard quite a bit because you're going to have to get the public IP or the public DNS information every time you go in and out, because this is going to change. The internal might not change, but the external will. And I want you to keep track of this information in your engineering log. So be sure to have a look around the EC2 dashboard. Here's the global view. So have a look around here and notice these are at different places. That's Africa, Cape Town. And notice here it says an error occurred describing your resources. Some things are not available to us because we are running through AWS Academy. So whenever you see that, that's most likely the area. So maybe stick to the dashboard and have a look at your instances, see the different instance types. So if you end up here, notice this is the instances running. If you need to download the keys again, you can go here, or generate new keys, you can go here, go back to the dashboard, see what's running. And all along here, there's information as well, so be sure to check that out, and you get more information through the instance itself. So again, you're going to have to restart it next time. If I go out and come back in, I'm going to have to restart it. I'll leave that to you to try and do that. But what you have to do is kind of play around with this interface, and you can't really break it. So don't worry too much about that. And you won't actually use a lot of resources because you have that maximum of 4 hours to have it up. So I'm going to now end the lab. So that will kill my my instances. So when I want to go back in to install everything, I'm going to need to do that. But now I have SSH access, so I'm okay. I just need to start them. I'm kind of set up for everything. So copying the key is a one-time thing. I just have to use it every time I want to start. So notice here, it's red now. It hasn't updated my money. But when I try to go in here, notice failed to describe because I am now logged off. I've now stopped the lab, so I no longer have access. So in order to get it back again, I have to start the lab, go back in, maybe relaunch my instances or check that they're relaunched, check the DNS information, and then use that to access the system. So there we go. So hopefully you can play around with this and get your system up. I expect you to know how to set up Apache, how to set up vhosts, shell into a system, and I've shown you how to access it using the PEM file. And here, just to show you what happens when the system is shut down, I'm going to get this. So it's going to try and connect, and it's going to time out. Again, I'm seeing all these debug information because I have the verbose. I was using that to figure out what I had done wrong, but all I had done wrong was the fact that I was missing the user ID. So, you're going to make mistakes, but you just have to persevere and try things. So that's it for AWS Academy and the EC2 dashboard. Ta-da!